Hare Krishna, devotees. Welcome to the 19th day of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, 19th day. And we're right at the end, very close to the end of the 6th chapter. Just a few more verses. So we'll conclude that, we'll go through that, and then we'll start on the 7th chapter of the second canto. Okay, so here we go. First of all, our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Niravishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripas sindubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, verse 42, and it's Lord Brahma speaking to Narada Muni. Karanarnavashai Vishnu means Karanadakshayi Vishnu is the first incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and he is the master of eternal time, space, cause and effects, mind, the elements, the material ego, the modes of nature, the senses, the universal form of the Lord, Garbhadakshayi Vishnu, and the sum total of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. Wow, so you get that. That's Karanarnavashai, otherwise known as Karanadakshayi Vishnu, or Mahavishnu. That's Mahavishnu. Right, okay, so let's get into the purport here. So, Prabhupada explains that this material world, material creation is temporary, and as Prabhupada says, as has been discussed many times herein before. Yeah, really. So it's temporary, and what's it there for? It's there to give a chance to the conditioned souls to get out of Maya, to get out of this place where Srila Prabhupada says, it's just such a nice way of putting it, that here people, they want to enjoy themselves as imitation gods. How true is that? So Srila Prabhupada talks about how they want to enjoy in this way and that, and somehow or other get enjoyment, even though they're not factual enjoyers, they're not constitutionally enjoyers. In terms of their real nature, they're constitutionally servants. Yes, that's the situation. But here they become false masters. I mean, they try to become, put it that way. Some of them do become to some degree for a while, but then after a while, they just get wiped out off the face of the map, just gone completely. Yes. And all that's left is some historical records, but they also get forgotten. So anyway, So the Vedas are there. The Lord, out of his mercy, he gives different facilities, including appearing himself personally, but otherwise, in a broader sense, he gives the Vedic literatures. They're there so we can learn the truth. And yeah, well, as we said, sometimes he comes as different incarnations. Sometimes he comes as Krishna himself, and he comes not as himself, but he comes himself. Or, as Prabhupada points out here, to manage the whole show of the material manifestation, temporary creation, the Lord incarnates himself, as the verse says, as the Karanarnavashai Vishnu. And Prabhupada says, just like a magistrate deputed by the government to manage things for some time. Yeah, you get that. Elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada talks about the same phenomenon of the government appointing someone to temporarily manage like a special program which the government's doing. And they talk about, Prabhupada talks about some sort of show that the government is putting on. Like you get these Easter shows in the Western world, the Easter shows just for a week or some brief period. The government puts on this big thing with all sorts of displays and circus things and all that. And they appoint someone to be the manager. And so the person manages, and then after the week or two, whatever it is, the show is wound up. And then the person who managed it is no longer the manager. He's withdrawn. So Prabhupada says that Karanadakshai Vishnu or Karanarnavashai Vishnu is like such a magistrate or manager temporarily managing a special thing, which in this case is the material creation. It has a special purpose. Yeah, so Karanadakshai Vishnu then, he has his way of doing things. He glances and like this, things get put into action. And this happens again and again and again, kalpa after kalpa. Yes. So he then, Karanarnavashai Vishnu or Karanadakshai Vishnu, is a plenary part. He's a plenary part. Prabhupada says the plenary part of the original personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. And then Prabhupada, to elaborate a little on that, Srila Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita, verse 48. Yes. These innumerable universes, so many universes, are maintained only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu or Karanarnavashai Vishnu. Right. So, yes, there you go, devotees. That's Lord Brahma taking it all a step further. And then the next, 3 verses, verse 43, 44, and 45, Prabhupada has put them all together because they're all discussing the same subject, which is that so many beings, they have special powers, opulences, expertises, and also beauty, even so many different qualities in different cases. And sometimes they have a form. I mean, generally they have a form, but sometimes they're formless. And each one may appear to be the specific truth and the form of the Lord, but actually they're not so. Yeah, they're just fragments of his potency. So, right, let us read then 43, 44, 45. Lord Brahma says, I myself, Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, great generators of living beings like Daksha and Prajapati, yourselves, Narada, which means Narada and the Kumars, the heavenly demigods like Indra and Chandra, the leaders of the Burloka planets, the leaders of the earthly planets, the leaders of the lower planets, the leaders of the Gandharva planets, the leaders of the Vidyadhara planets, the leaders of the Charanaloka planets, the leaders of the Yakshas, Rakshas, and Uragas, the great sages, the great demons, the great atheists, and the great spacemen, as well as, would you believe, the dead bodies. Hare Krishna. The dead bodies, the evil spirits, the Satans, the jinns, Kushmandas, great aquatics, great beasts and great birds, etc. In other words, there's more. There's more than this. In other words, anything and everything which is exceptionally possessed of power, opulence, mental and perceptual dexterity, strength, forgiveness, beauty, modesty, opulence, and breathing, whether in form or formless. So these things then, anything and everything, which is like as these qualities just described, not necessarily all of them at the same time, but at least some, or at least one of them for some time. So they may appear to be the specific truth and the form of the Lord, but actually they are not so. They're only a fragment of the transcendental potency of the Lord. So this is very powerful, isn't it? It's really amazing. Yes. And I just want to have where did Prabhupada take, what's he translated as Satan? Okay. Prabhupada has translated the term, yes, the Bhutas. Oh, all right. Actually, he has used the term Satans, but there's no actual specific term in the word for Satans as such. But anyway, we can just note they're really bad guys. They're just terrible. So, okay, let's go through the purport. It's as you might expect, fairly extensive purport. So those in the above list, they may seem to be the Lord, but they're not. Could be, because they're very impressive, to different people in different modes, like the great demigods. They will be impressed. They would be likely to think that someone is the Supreme Lord if they're really nice. very beautiful and merciful and intelligent, whereas, the evil spirits, Satan's, jinn, Kushmandas, these ones, they would think that some big demon is a candidate for being recognized or accepted as the Supreme Lord. Yeah. Anyway, so whichever of them, who or which possesses whichever quality or qualities, to whatever degree, whatever quantity, certain types of people certain types of people will accept them to be the Lord, but they're not. Although there's something special about them compared to the living entities in general. But Prabhupada makes the point, they only possess a fragment of the potencies of the Lord. So Prabhupada makes the point that less intelligent people, when they see special displays of the material nature, then they become very impressed, and you could say they attribute some special position, to whatever it is. Prabhupada mentions, Aboriginal people, we're not necessarily just talking about the earlier inhabitants of Australia, but just undeveloped ethnic types of societies. I don't know if you've ever heard of the cargo cult. Have you heard of the cargo cult? You can Google it and read. It's really interesting. Cargo, as in, CARGO, what travels on ships from a manufacturer to the market. These ethnic people in, I think, Indonesia, some Westerners came, some white people came with cargo, with interesting manufactured items that people had never seen before. And so they accepted those people as gods. Yeah, have a look. And, it's really an example of what is being discussed here. Very vivid example of the, extremely unfortunate and actually, with all due respect, extremely stupid ideas of these people, inexperienced people. So, undeveloped people may find certain things amazing. More advanced people will be impressed, for example, by demigods. And Prabhupada actually gives examples here that those who are simply astonished by the powers of anything in the creation of the Lord, without any factual information of the Lord himself, are known as Shaktas, or worshippers of the great powers. Because Shakti, a Shakta is someone who worships Shakti, who worships either just a power or someone who has a power. So, and Prabhupada makes a very interesting point that the modern scientists, they're captivated by natural phenomena, the actions and reactions of material nature. And therefore, Prabhupada says, that you can say that such scientists are also Shaktas of a type. But then these lower grade people, Prabhupada says, gradually rise to become Sauriyas, worshippers of the sun god, then Ganapachas, worshippers of the massive people, as Janata Janardhan or Dharitra Narayan itself, in the form of Ganapati Ganesh. Then they come up to the level of worshipping Lord Shiva, and then to the stage of worshipping Lord Vishnu. Yes. And Prabhupada says, in other words, some worship race, some worship nationality, birds, beasts, evil spirits, Satans, etc. You know, in South Africa and in India also to some degree in some places, but it's not uncommon in South Africa. People worship snakes. They regard them as being, you know, special entities who can benedict them. And so, you know, when sometimes, near our temple in Chatsworth in Durban, there was a snake hole. Snake hole means, you know, sort of like a little substantial hole, not big, but something is, and obviously it goes down and a snake lives there. So the people started worshipping. And now devotees, there's a whole temple there with a few buildings on, you know, on a piece of property. But it all started with worshipping the snake in the snake hole. Yes. And Prabhupada makes an interesting point that a lot of people worship a lot of people worship Sunny Dev, Shani Dev, or Shitala Devi. But Shani Dev, you know, in Vraj Mandala, if you go to Yavat, place of Jatila and place of many pastimes of Radharani and Lord Krishna, so Yavat, it's for the Vaishnavas, it's a very famous place, and we were just there several weeks ago, in fact, or 2 or 3 months ago. But, you know, you come up from Nandagram, you come up on the main road, you turn right to go inside a kilometer or so further into Yavat, but there's a left, more or less opposite. And if you go down the left a kilometer or 500 meters or so, then there's a whole quite big religious setup where the main deity is Shanidev, who is worshipped for good health. And on Saturdays, because Saturday is Shanivar, it's his day, it's Shanivar, Saturday, then so many people go to worship Shanidev. So anyway, the point which which the verses are making and which Prabhupada's emphasizing is that some people, different people, worship different potent manifestations of the Lord. They're all manifestations of the Lord, but they're not the Lord as such. You know, achintya bhed abhed tattva, different from and non-different from. So these forms, they have some non-difference in the sense they have great powers from the Lord, relative to the average person usually. But compared to the Lord himself, they're just They're just not very impressive. They're really not so impressive. Yes. But now these people think they are the Lord. But Lord Brahma is making it very clear here that none of them are the Lord. And Prabhupada says that they're only borrowed plumes from the original Almighty Lord Sri Krishna. Borrowed plumes means that, it can be any bird, but it's typically a peacock, has beautiful plumes, beautiful feathers, of course. And therefore, peacocks are, they're really admired tremendously. So you can take some feathers from a peacock, or borrow or take, and then try and use them so that you also become appreciated for some type of beauty. That's borrowed plumes. When the Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita to worship him alone, it is to be understood that worshipping Lord Krishna includes worshipping all that is mentioned in these verses here. Because he, Lord Krishna, includes everyone. All right, so there's a second paragraph here that these are all exhibitions. This is the thing. These are all exhibitions of his potencies, and ultimately his potencies are transcendental. Yes. So, but when he comes, less intelligent people think he's one of us, one of them, and then they think the Supreme Lord, like he's a special manifestation of what is actually formless, but now he manifests in this world with a form. But actually is formless originally. So Prabhupada really didn't appreciate that idea. The Lord has a form, always and wherever. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one should try to know the truth about the Lord by following the instruction of Brahmaji. Yes. All right. And verse 46, which is the last verse, and then we'll go on to chapter 7. So, verse 46. O Narada, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnations of the Lord, known as Leela avatars. Hearing of their activities counteracts all foul matters accumulated in the air. Oh, Krishna, that's good. That's really good. These pastimes are pleasing to hear and are to be relished. Therefore, they are in my heart. Wow, that's really beautiful. That's really nice, isn't it? Brahma, Lord Brahma, he stores the pastimes in his heart, so he can just relish them and relish them. They're right there all the time, not just sometimes or when some other devotee tells a pastime, but those pastimes are always within Lord Brahma's heart. So Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, as it was said in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto, chapter 5, verse 8, one cannot be fully satisfied by hearing unless and until one is given a chance to hear of the transcendental activities of the Lord. So Lord Brahma, Prabhupada makes the point, is trying to stress this. How the Lord comes to this world at Leela avatars, pastime forms. So we all, Prabhupada makes the point, we all have the tendency to hear some pleasing messages, some nice news, and some good things, some interesting things are happening. And, for example, this is all temporary, but it is an example that in the world of soccer, Argentina just won the World Cup. And I read maybe this morning, it must have been this morning, that in Argentina, the people are in sort of, quote unquote, ecstasy. It's just incredible. But just wait, devotees and friends. Give them some days, not a long time. Just give them some days, whatever it may be. And again, they'll be unhappy about life and this and that. And the fact that their team won the World Cup is not going to be so important. Rather, they're going to become preoccupied with the immediate circumstances. Yeah. So therefore, even when people hear materially pleasing news and, music even, so they've got a tendency to focus on it, but they don't become satisfied. Very important. This is because all these things are incompatible with what we are. We are spiritual, and the World Cup is material. And, the war, this war and that war, and the politics and financial situations and just everything on the material level is material, but we're spiritual. So there's some incompatibility. We cannot really coexist nicely on an extended, ongoing basis. Just like if you're familiar with oil and water, or like petrol and water, you can put them together. And you can, if you put them in some container and shake it up, and then look quickly, it'll seem like they've mixed them in together with each other. But you just wait. The petrol or the oil will come to the surface, and the water will stay underneath, because they are incompatible by nature. Right, okay. So therefore, Prabhupada makes the point, therefore, we must hear the messages of the Lord, of course. And Prabhupada makes the point, there are two types of messages, or or he actually says there are two types of activities, so there are two types of messages about, one about this activity, the other about another activity. So what are those? There are messages of the Lord to do with his creative powers, and then there are messages of the Lord to do with his pastimes as incarnations. Yes. So Prabhupada makes the point, there are innumerable incarnations. There's just so many of them that you cannot actually count them. So amongst these two types of activities, activities of creation, activities to do with his creative powers, and activities, his pastimes as incarnations, less intelligent people, Prabhupada says, take more interest in the creative forces of the Lord in the material world. That doesn't mean that they study the scriptures in which the process of creation is described. No. But they speculate. They're the scientists who speculate on all these things about, how the world was created and all these types of things. That's the point. So they have many theories about creation through their so-called science. But the devotees understand clearly how the creative forces of the Lord, they work concurrently, Prabhupada says, by the action and reaction of the material energy. Yes. Yes. So the devotees know about these things. They already know. Therefore, they are prone to be more interested in the transcendental activities, the pastimes, as he incarnates on the surface of this planet. Yes. And of course, Srimad Bhagavatam is the history of such activities. That's it. It is the best. Yes. I mean, there are others also, but the Bhagavatam is the best history of the pastimes of the Lord. And as per the verse itself, people who take interest in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam clear their hearts of accumulated mundane filth. Yeah. So Prabhupada says, there are 1,001, Prabhupada calls them rash literatures, attempts to create some interesting story which, captures people, like these hero stories and love stories and all these things. Some are just totally fictitious. Some may be historical writings of things that actually happened. But one way or the other, Prabhupada makes the point that anyone who gets a taste for Srimad Bhagavatam loses all interest in such, Prabhupada says, such filthy literatures. Oh yeah. So therefore Lord Brahma, Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Sri Brahmaji is thus attempting to narrate the principal incarnations of the Lord so that they may be drunk by Narada as transcendental nectar. So devotees, that's the end of the 6th chapter of the 2nd canto. So we're going to go straight on and get into the 7th chapter. And 7th chapter is titled, just a sec. 2nd chapter is titled, 7th chapter, scheduled incarnations with specific functions. Right. Okay, so now this is a bit longer chapter than your average chapter. It's 53 verses, but it's only 3 it's It's only 3 sections. As we just read how the next chapter is going to describe the incarnations. So, yes. So the first section of chapter 7 is from verse 1 to verse 38, a list of the avatars. Then second section from 39 to 49, Lord Brahma concludes his glorification of the Lord and of the process for approaching him, for approaching the Lord. Right, 39 to 49. Then the third section, verse 50 to 53, just a very short section. Lord Brahma asks Narada to expand the science further. He asks them to, or he instructs them, expand the science further, preach, which Narada Muni then does. Okay, so the first section is from verse 1 to 38. That's a really long section, listing out these avatars who on the whole, because don't forget, the question which was raised was, or maybe not the question, but the subject which was raised by Brahma himself was about the Leela avatars, the pastime forms of the Lord. And in fact, just looking back at the last verse, 46 of chapter 6, in the second line, you'll see, Leelavataram Purushasya Bhumna. Yeah, so Brahma says in that last verse, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnations of the Lord, known as Leela avatars. So that's what we're faced with here. Now the thing is, there's 38 verses. So therefore, devotees, I'm not going to read through all the verses and then come back and do the verses again with the purports. I'm just going to go through the whole thing, verse and purport, from the word go, from right now. So, okay, verse 1 of chapter 7 is about Lord Varaha. Lord Brahma said, when the unlimitedly powerful Lord assumed the form of a boar as a pastime, just to lift the planet Earth, which was drowned in the great ocean of the universe called the Gabadak. Then at that time the first demon, Hiranyaksha, appeared, and the Lord pierced him with his tusk. Okay. So there we go. Srila Prabhupada begins by saying that since time immemorial, there's been a clash between the demigods and the demons. So here we are. It's at the beginning of creation, or of one of the creations. And at that time, Lord Brahma was the first demigod, and Hiranyaksha was the first demon. Yes. So Prabhupada makes the point, because this is very, Varaha is a very interesting form of the Lord, that generally by Lord Brahma's arrangement, or ultimately by the Supreme Lord's arrangement, ultimately, the planets float. When they're favorable conditions, the planets float in the sky. Yeah, like now. But they don't always float. They don't only float. They float nicely when there's certain favorable conditions. Otherwise, they fall into the Garbatak Ocean, which fills the lower half of the universe. So that's quite an ocean, isn't it? So therefore, only half of the universe, is where the people live, where the planets are. So Prabhupada says, the floating of the planets in the weightless air is due to the inner constitution of the globes, and the modernized drilling of the earth to exploit oil from within is a sort of disturbance by the modern demons and can result in a greatly harmful reaction to the floating condition of the earth. That's quite amazing, isn't it? In other words, you never know. You know, we're just sort of, it appears, I mean, you never know, but it appears we're in the later stages of COVID. I mean, quite later. Yeah. But what's going to be next? What's going to be next? That's a really excellent question. And probably we can only really assume something is going to be next on the material level. There's going to be some sort of special thing that happens. I mean, we've got Russia with Ukraine at the moment. And that's another thing. You know, who expected COVID, but who expected Russia to invade Ukraine? So what's going to be next? You know, these people are drilling and taking out more and more oil every day. I mean, loads of oil every day. So as Prabhupada says, that this is a sort of disturbance by the modern demons and can result in a greatly harmful reaction to the floating condition. In other words, Earth may stop floating properly, which could mean, I don't know, could mean it could tilt. It could tilt. And so the North Pole and the South Pole might become tropical. Yeah, well, when Hiranyaksha was there, the planet didn't exactly tilt. It just fell into the Garbatak Ocean. So, you know, you may be sitting there thinking that, you know, it's not going to happen. But it could. The planet could tilt or start spinning, you know, in a different way, an imbalanced way, or it could even fall. And that'd be a serious problem, wouldn't it? Yeah, okay, so this, Prabhupada makes the point, this actually happened with Hiranyaksha. The planet was thrown out of balance. He was not trying to drill or dig for oil. He was digging for gold, and therefore Prabhupada refers to him as the great exploiter of the gold rush. And Prabhupada then quotes Jayadev Goswami, his verses about some of the avatars. Yes, there's this verse from Jayadev about Lord Varaha. All right, so we go on to the second paragraph. So Prabhupada makes the point. This is a symptom of an avatar. Yeah. The symptom is that the Lord intervenes and does something really wonderful to save the situation. That is the symptom of an incarnation of the Lord. It's not imaginary, but the incarnation of the Lord appears, Prabhupada says, under extraordinary circumstances to do something unimaginable by us, like what Varaha did, saving the earth from the Garbhadak ocean. And those who make up modern so-called avatars must note this. Just like here in Mauritius right now, we had the Rath Yatra festival for 3 days or 2 days and 1 night. Really nice. Just great. At the same time, one person who some of whose followers say that he is an avatar. Yes. They had a festival also, some distance away, but at the same time. And the point is, Prabhupada's point is, the avatars, they appear under extraordinary circumstances to do something really special, like Varaha did. Yeah, lifting the earth. So I was thinking that if we meet any avatar, so-called, we should ask them, and Prabhupada suggests this, to lift Govardhan Hill. And of course they won't. Obviously, they won't even try. But then we know that they're not avatars, they're just cheaters. So, okay, now, verse 2. Verse 2 is about a special incarnation of the Lord who we're not so familiar with, at least, I mean, I'm not, and I think many devotees are not. Suyagya, yeah, also known as Hari. Later he was called Hari. So, all right, here's the verse 2. The Prajapati first begot Suyagya in the womb of his wife Akuti, and then Suyagya begot demigods headed by Suyama in the womb of his wife Dakshina. Suyagya as the Indradev. So Suyagya became Lord Indra. He diminished very great miseries in the 3 planetary systems, upper, lower, and intermediate. And because he so diminished the miseries of the universe, he was later called Hari by the great father of mankind, Swayambhuva Manu. So that's interesting. Let's have a look at the purport. It's just a short purport. So Prabhupada makes the point that in order to guard against the invention of unauthorized incarnations, here the name of the father of the bona fide incarnation, as well as the name of the village or place in which he appears, this is given. And Prabhupada says, no one can be accepted as an incarnation if his father's name, as well as the name of his village or place in which he appears, is not mentioned by the authorized scriptures. Yeah. And this is the case we can note with Kalki. Kalki's coming later, really later, much later. And so the same information is there. What's his father's name and what's the name of where he appeared. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a sane man, therefore, does not accept any cheap edition of an incarnation without reference to the authorized scriptures. Yeah, we should be careful, because it's easy to get misled. And some of these people, so-called avatars, they actually consciously want to mislead. Yeah. All right, so chapter 7, verse 3. The Lord then appeared as the Kapila incarnation, being the son of the Prajapati Brahmin Karadama and his wife Devahuti, along with 9 other women or sisters. So Kapila spoke to his mother about self-realization, by which, in that very lifetime, she became fully cleansed of the mud of the material modes and thereby achieved liberation, the path of Kapila. So, yeah, in the purport, Prabhupada points out that the whole story of Kapila with Devahuti and Kardama and, things that led up to Kapila's appearance, these things are fully described in the 3rd canto, chapters 25 to 32 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyone who follows those instructions given there can get the same liberation obtained by Devahuti. She went back to Godhead, permanently back to Godhead. Yes. So the same principle applies. It's not just in regard to Kapila with Devahuti and what benefit she got eventually, but the same thing applies with the Lord speaking Bhagavad Gita and speaking it to Arjuna. Arjuna became fully self-realized. And even today, in this rotten, my Lord, horrible Kali Yuga, anyone who follows the path of Arjuna will get the same benefit as he got of becoming fully self-realized and qualified to go back to Godhead. So, okay. So we shouldn't give false interpretations of Shastra. Just follow the instructions of the bona fide avatars. Okay, so the second paragraph, Prabhupada talks about Atmagatim. Atmagatim is mentioned in the verse. It is the goals, the achievements, the liberation of the pure soul. Atmagatim. Yes, right. Sense of perfect knowledge. So we should be satisfied. We should be satisfied. We should not speculate. Rather, we want Atmagatim. Prabhupada says the word Atmagatim is significant in the sense of perfect knowledge of the Supreme. One shouldn't be satisfied simply by knowing the qualitative equality of the Lord and the living being. One should know the Lord as much as can be known by our limited knowledge. Yeah. So we can't know him completely. Even Brahma and Shiva can't. So what about us? So, okay. So Lord Kapila instructed his mother. Then she realized the personal form of the Lord, went to Vaikuntha to live with Kapila. All the avatars, Prabhupada makes the point, all the avatars have their own places, and they live there with their devotees. Prabhupada says, in the same style as the Lord and his eternal associates. So then Prabhupada lists out all the different types of forms of the Lord. Angsa, Kala, Guna, Yuga, Manvantara avatars. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point, when the Lord's associates come, they're Shakya-Vaisha avatars. So they're all authorized by Shastra, like here, listed out, and not by imaginations of some self-interested propagandist. And they always preach the personality of the Lord, not impersonalism. So let's see. Prabhupada's talking about these different forms of the Lord in the next paragraph. I mean, in the, third paragraph, yeah. They're all listed out in scripture. And the incarnations always declare that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate truth, and that the impersonal conception of the Supreme Truth is just a process of negation, not this, not this, not this. So that's discussed in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse it's the next paragraph, yeah. We'll get there in a moment. So actually we're all spiritually as good as the Lord, but the difference is he's always supreme and pure, and we are prone to become contaminated. But this contamination can be washed off completely by devotional service with knowledge and renunciation. So of course the main factor is devotional service. So those who have devotional service, they get not only knowledge, but also detachment from matter, and therefore they go back to Godhead. And that is described in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vyabhicharena Bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Excuse me. That even in the non-liberated stage, a living entity can be directly engaged in the transcendental, loving service of the Lord, at Krishna, or any expansion, it's possible. So then, with the proportionate development, proportionate improvement of such devotional service, the devotee makes definite progress towards Brahmagatim or Atmagatim, and ultimately attains Kapilasya Gatim, the abode of the Lord, without difficulty. So interesting. The goal, you go to Lord Kapila. At least that's what happened to Devahuti. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the antiseptic potency of devotional service to the Lord is so great that it can neutralize the material infection even in the present life of a devotee, even in the present life. A devotee does not need to wait for his next birth for complete liberation. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.